Everybody, Dr. Rob Silverman here, Proven Health Alternatives. I'm here with my esteemed colleague, Dr. Leon Bynoe. This man is going to change how you look at a diet, how you look at longevity, how you look at lifestyle. As we all know, the Mediterranean diet has been ranked the #1 diet 6 years running. Everybody is running to do a Mediterranean diet. Leon, what's your feelings on that?
Yeah, and I think that's probably what's wrong with our healthcare system today. I think the Mediterranean diet is fundamentally flawed, and it's fundamentally flawed in ways that harm us. And it is a diet that was literally impossible for over 99% of humanity's time on this planet. Okay, so it's they hype the diet, they make it sound like it's something that humans are supposed to do, but it literally would have been impossible for humans to do this up until very recently in human history. And so my problem with the Mediterranean diet is that it does three things that humans were never evolved to handle. It dumps too much sugar into your body, and dumping too much sugar into your body does the second thing, which makes your body secrete way too much insulin. And then the third thing, and this is probably the most important, is that it dumps too much polyunsaturated fatty acids into your body by way of the vegetable seed oils. And so these three things, I believe, are what is driving the explosion in metabolic syndrome and indeed all of our diseases of civilization. A lot of people will push back and say, "Oh, but we're living longer now than ever. We lived to be 35 years old," and that there's a lot wrong with that when people say that. First of all, it's average life expectancy. And average life expectancy, that is, it might have been 35 years, but it also is taking into account that women were dying in childbirth all the time. Most children didn't reach their 5th birthday. So there were there were lots of stuff that killed us. We got killed by infections, cholera outbreaks, tuberculosis, leprosy, natural disasters before we had shelter that could keep us, like if we just had this hurricane before we had the kind of hurricane coated housing that could save our lives, whole towns would have just been wiped out. Now, people still die, but it's, so there were so many things that used to kill us before age 35, but I can tell you what wasn't killing us before age 35 or even 50 or 60. It wasn't hypertension that was killing us. It wasn't diabetes that was killing us. It wasn't cancer that was killing us. Okay, it wasn't these things. So if you managed to avoid tuberculosis and cholera and natural disasters and getting eaten by a lion, and you made it to 50 or 60, you were healthy. And we have a lot of evidence of that even now, because there are places now that don't have our food, that don't have our diet of civilization, and they are very healthy and they don't get our diseases of civilization. Now, unfortunately, there aren't that many places left on this planet that haven't been touched by our food supply. But this as late as less than 100 years ago, when Weston Price did his studies of the Maasai tribe and the Akikuyu in the 1930s, and these people, were very healthy. And interestingly enough, the Maasai tribe, which ate a lot more meat than the Akikuyu, were also physically superior, but in almost every measure. They were taller, they were stronger, they had better teeth. Yes. So, but now, of course, what was absent from their diet? Well, they didn't have our vegetable oils, and they didn't have our processed foods. They didn't have our carbohydrates. Okay. So, point is that if you really look at what the science shows, it shows that the Mediterranean diet is just all wrong.
So let's recap. And I concur with you wholeheartedly. And I'm excited that you shared that. Number one, no glucose, no need for carbohydrates. Number two, with no carbohydrates, we won't have any insulin release, i.e. insulin resistance. And number three, you said no polyunsaturated fatty acids, with the caveat it being vegetable processed seed oils, because obviously polyunsaturated
I'll clarify that. All fats are a combination of saturated fat monounsaturated fat, and polyunsaturated fat. All fats are. But the
Mhm.
fats that occur in nature, the fats that occur like animal fat or the fat that you get from fatty fruits like
Mm.
avocado or olive oil, okay?
Coconut.
Those are fats that occur in nature and their polyunsaturated fatty acid content. And from now on, I'm just going to say PUFA because that's a lot
Mm.
easier and faster to say. The PUFA content of the fats that occur in nature tend to be very low. Okay. Like, for example, avocado oil, the PUFA content of avocado oil is 14%. Olive oil is 11%. Beef fat is 4%. Coconut oil is like 2 to 4%.
There you go.
Okay. These are natural fats that occur in nature. But the vegetable seed oils, that is literally a human invention. Okay. Because to get oil out of a soybean or a kernel of corn or safflower or rice bran. To get oil out of these things requires a chemical extraction process, which was first invented only 200 years ago with the invention of cottonseed oil. That was the very first vegetable seed oil. And its original purpose was to lubricate the cotton gin. So it was motor oil, basically, and it should have stayed that way. Okay. Now understand, now what's wrong with these vegetable oils, these seed oils? The PUFA content is insanely high. Canola oil, the PUFA content of canola oil is 28%. That is double the PUFA content of avocado oil. Safflower oil is 78% PUFA. Okay. And here's the problem with PUFAs. The more unsaturated a fat, the more unstable it is. Okay. And I could go into the chemistry, but actually I won't go into the chemistry. But basically, unsaturation are sites where carbons are double bonded, and they are highly susceptible to oxidation. And when you oxidate these products, they turn into insanely toxic compounds like aldehydes and lipid peroxides. Okay, and this is all well established science.
Mhm.
These
Besides that,
these toxic compounds do things that, I mean, we're well aware of what they do. They destabilize your cell membranes. They collapse your mitochondria. And mitochondria are the organelles which are required to metabolize fat. Without mitochondria, there is no fat metabolism. And now we have these metabolites that are collapsing your fat burning organelles. So they destabilize your cell membranes, they collapse your mitochondria, and they mutate your DNA. Okay. One of these toxic metabolites in particular, 4-hydroxynonenone or 4-HNE,
that's right.
will reliably produce the most common DNA mutation found in adult cancers. Okay. It's considered a cancer hotspot, this gene locus. But the interesting thing is that a lot of people think cancer is genetic disease, but it's actually a metabolic disease. The thing that you'll find in all cancers, even before you find DNA mutation, you will see mitochondrial collapse. You will find this upstream of the DNA mutation. Okay. But it doesn't matter because the vegetable oils and their toxic metabolites cause both.
So vegetable oil was originally used as motor oil. So I
Yeah.
think that's quite evocative in the fact that, when people think about drinking that, it'll be quite vivifying. Good motor oil. Is it leaded or unleaded? Another recap is that vegetable oils damage cell metabolism or the cell membrane, and we're all made up of cell membranes. Maybe the biggest thing is it causes mitochondrial collapse. Mitochondrial dysfunction may be the bane of our current existence, leading to long COVID, if you will, a lot of neurodegenerative disease. And when you talk about the DNA getting damaged in cancer, I'm sure you caught everybody's attention. And again, you refer to the idea of metabolic disease, i.e. Ozempic. So I'm giving you a lot back on your plate. I'm giving you seconds, but most people are going to want to know your background. How does this guy know this? What does he do every day? So,
Okay. So I'm a retina specialist. All right. So I'm an ophthalmologist but I specialize in retina. Okay. And so the retina is like on the inside of the eye. It's like the film of a camera. So it's on the inside, it's the inside lining of the eye. And, like your cornea and your lens would be the lenses of the camera. They focus the image onto the film, and the film of the eye would be the retina. And so I specialize in treating diseases and I do surgery on this part of the eye. But but I am, I went to medical school and I learned all of the stuff that they teach us doctors. Most of it is wrong, at least when it comes to nutrition and well,
Like,
especially when it comes to nutrition. But the way I came to understand all this stuff is, well, it certainly I wasn't taught it in medical school. What I learned, I basically spent my whole life doing, putting into practice what I learned in medical school. The Mediterranean diet, lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of green leafies, a diet that is predominantly plant-based, a diet that where the highest macromolecule is carbohydrate. Like most of it's like probably 2/3 to like 60 to 70% of the diet is coming from plants and from carbohydrates. Minimal fatty red meat because that's supposed to be, saturated fat is supposed to be bad for you. And this is what I learned in medical school, and this is what I learned from all our experts, and this is what I did for 40 years. Okay. And here's the thing, I think I'm uniquely qualified to talk about this because, I am someone who did everything right. Okay. I wasn't eating junk food. I wasn't eating donuts. I wasn't eating fast food. I was eating the whole grains. I was eating the brown rice. I was eating lots of fresh fruit. I was eating the most fibrous vegetables. I was eating the leanest meats, your poultry and your seafood and your fish. And if I ate beef, I was eating the lean cuts of beef. I was doing everything that these dietary guidelines tell you you're supposed to do. They make this little pyramid where they put all the stuff you're supposed to be eating the most of at the bottom and the stuff that you're supposed to be eating the least of at the top. And I absolutely followed that pattern. Okay. And what did it do for me? Well, by age 52, I was obese, I was hypertensive, and I'd come down with a pulmonary embolus. And that's when you get a clot, usually in one of the deep veins in your lower leg. And I got a clot in my right lower leg that a piece of it broke off, went to my lungs. And thankfully, the piece wasn't very big because if it just been maybe a little bit bigger, it could have closed off my pulmonary artery and I could have been dead in seconds. That's how serious this is. Now, it wasn't that big. I just had a lot of small ones. And it turned out, like when I went to the hospital for this, I didn't have to go to the intensive care unit or anything like that. They put me on blood thinners and, and I recovered through that. But that's what got me to thinking, how is it that I did everything that the dietary guidelines said and no doctor could tell me that, oh, well, you should have done this, you should have done that. Nonsense. Oh, I forgot one other thing. I'm also someone who always exercised. Okay. From the time of my teens, I was running 4 to 6 miles per day, every day, lifting, I was not the couch potato. So they couldn't even say that was what might have caused it. I was very, very disciplined, did everything you're supposed to do. And I end up a physical wreck at age 52. So this is where I first started thinking, well, maybe what I was taught isn't correct. All right. Maybe the science wasn't really there to support this Mediterranean diet because I did everything right. And why am I in such bad shape at what I think is a relatively young age? Yes, I had beaten the 35-year average age of, of our forefathers. But again, I probably wasn't going to get cholera. I probably wasn't going to get tuberculosis, and I probably wasn't going to get eaten by a predator to end my life at 35. So it was not something, 52 is young when you don't have all those other things out there that are going to kill you. You have fresh drinking water, you have sanitation, you have all these things. So if you should, 52 is young when you don't have other stuff killing you.
Indeed to that, my friend. Indeed to that. I hear you.
Right.
I feel that. No doubt about that.
Right. So this is what first made me start to be, to search, to try to find answers. Okay. And so it just sort of happened by chance. My wife, who is also a physician, she's an anesthesiologist, but she saw something on TV about intermittent fasting. Okay. And it was just on some talk show or something. And it sounded interesting to us. And she came home and told me about it. And then when you start researching intermittent fasting, then it sort of made me start to relearn what I was taught in medical school about insulin, but never really taught to focus on. Okay. I mean, I was taught in medical school that insulin regulates blood sugar, that it directs the body to store fat, and that it does a bunch of things. But we were taught that, but we were never really taught to apply that to, well, what's happening in our body metabolically. Okay. Like right now, when they treat diabetes, they're not looking at insulin, they're looking at your blood sugar. Okay. And when the blood sugar goes high, then they all start to say, oh, you're pre-diabetic and all this stuff, right? But if they'd been looking at insulin, they could have diagnosed the problem a decade, maybe 15 years before this, before the blood sugar ever went up.
So you're saying that insulin resistance and insulin levels are a great way to portend pre-diabetes, diabetes, and the like. So you'll know more from insulin over a duration of time than you will from glucose levels.
Well, but I mean, what you will see is that you're having to make more and more insulin to keep that blood sugar normal. That's what the problem is. But they're not really checking that. They're not checking that. They're not checking pea protein or basically indicators that show how much insulin does it take for your body to keep your blood sugar normal. That is the question we should be asking, and that's what no one's doing. Okay, so anyway, so we learned about intermittent fasting, and then I started thinking more about insulin. And then I'm started thinking, well, I'm running 4 to 6 miles a day. I'm eating the way they're saying I'm supposed to eat. Why did I get overweight? And probably started struggling with my weight like most people, start having, gaining weight in the 30s and stuff. And, you're still young enough where you can work it off for the beach trip or for the wedding. But then it comes back. And then by the time you're in your 40s and mid 40s, you can lose weight, but the physical fitness level that you can get to just keeps getting lower and lower is what happens. And so I'm doing all these things right. And then it just made me dawn on me about, well, insulin. Insulin is literally the hormone that directs your body to store fat. Perhaps I'm getting fat because I'm just making too much insulin. Okay. And that's why, and so with that thought, then I really started relearning about insulin. And then I realized that, yeah, and the thing that makes you make the most insulin by far are carbohydrates. Okay. If you look at the insulin response curves, you'll see that you eat the carbohydrates and it goes way up here. If you eat protein, it's like half of that. And fat is even lower. Okay. So carbohydrates make you make a lot of insulin. Insulin directs your body to store fat. So then I started thinking, well, maybe the reason I'm gaining weight and I'm having trouble, getting in shape the older I get is because I'm making too much insulin. And then, of course, when you go down that rabbit hole of, you start with the intermittent fasting, and then you start learning about that, then you start hearing low carb, high fat. You start hearing these terms. And then I was like, wow, low carb, high fat. But wait, carbohydrates are the thing that make you make the most insulin. Fat is the thing that makes you make the least. So if you're low carb and you're high fat, you're going to be making a lot less insulin because you're going to be eating more of the thing that makes you make less insulin and less of the thing that makes you make more insulin. So now it's all starting to come together. Insulin is the central thing. Glucose makes you make the most of it. Fat makes you make the least of it. So why is everyone getting overweight as they get older? Because the diet, 2/3 of their diet is carbohydrates. The very thing that makes you make the most insulin. And the doctors for the last 40 years have been telling everyone that don't eat fat because it'll make you unhealthy. So you've been lowering the proportion of the food that makes you make the least amount of insulin. And lo and behold, you follow this recipe, and over the last 30, 40 years, obesity rates have more than tripled. Okay. And here's the kicker. Is that food production and consumption data proves that every single thing that the dietary guidelines told us to do, we have done. Every single thing that they told you to eat more of, we are eating more of. We are eating more plant-based foods. We're eating more carbohydrates. We're eating more vegetable oils. Matter of fact, right now, vegetable oil is the predominant fat in the Western diet. We're consuming more vegetable oil as our fat than any other fat. Okay, so food production and consumption data proves it. The dietary guidelines, it literally has been tested. And what are the results of that test? Everything has gotten worse. obesity has tripled, diabetes, cancer, all of these things have tripled or quadrupled even in the last 4 to 5 decades, even as these dietary guidelines have been followed. And as I said, even if I didn't have that piece of information, I did this experiment. I did it myself. Okay.
You are the experiment.
I absolutely am the experiment.
Let's recoup what we did here.
Yes.
So clearly you need to have an energy source. You have a choice between carbohydrates and fat.
Yes.
So fat is clean energy, carbs are dirty energy. Carbs release insulin, really, no, it's a no bueno. And the American diet is laden with carbohydrates, i.e.,
It is dominated. It is dominated by carbohydrates.
ultra-processed foods. 67% of the calories we're offered come from ultra-processed foods, which are going to raise your insulin and take you down the pipe. Protein is a staple. You need to protect your protein, so you need an energy source. Fat, again, better energy source, so you have protein for enzymatic reactions, miracle macronutrient, muscle, etc. Intermittent fasting makes sense because we weren't made to eat all day like they have us doing. Now, you also made something, big beeping bullet board would be as simple as the number one fat Americans consume are vegetable oils. And you gave, I mean, that's great. You should wear that on your shirt, man.
And here's the thing. Here's why that is so dangerous. I think if there is one thing that's worse than your diet being based on carbohydrates, it is consuming any vegetable oils. Because here's the thing. I think you could get away with a high carb diet. As a matter of fact, remember I mentioned those population studies. There are populations, of indigenous ancestral food consuming populations that are predominantly carbohydrate. I think there's one tribe. I don't know whether it was the Tukasento or the Togalu or what. All right, I don't remember the name, but there was a tribe where like 70–80% of their calories come from carbohydrates. All right. But they weren't getting the diseases of civilization either. Now, I don't think they were as fit as the Maasai, but they weren't they were pretty healthy too. And I think the reason for that is you can get away with carbohydrates because your body will make more and more insulin to cover for it. But if you throw in the vegetable oils, now you've really wrecked things, because now here's what happens and why I think the only absolute I have for anyone is no vegetable oils. Carbs are negotiable, but vegetable oils are not. And here's why. Because I told you that the more unsaturated the fat, the more unstable. And these unstable metabolites wreck things, specifically the mitochondria. Okay, so here's what happens. And this is why it's so funny, because the media keeps acting like obesity is some mystery, we don't know why. To me, obesity is the least mysterious thing ever. Okay, it is so understandable exactly what is happening in obesity in Western society. And here's what's happening. Okay, so now you consume vegetable oils. Right now, vegetable oils are a predominant fat that we're consuming. These vegetable oils are full of PUFAs. PUFAs are unstable. They break down into compounds which wreck your mitochondria. Your mitochondria are the organelles that you require to burn fat. Okay, so now you've collapsed your mitochondria, you've decreased your body's ability to burn fat for energy. So now, what are your alternatives? Now you have to use carbohydrates for energy. Because if you don't have the mitochondria to burn fat, now you can use glucose to burn energy, because you can ferment glucose in the cytoplasm. You don't need mitochondria to get energy from glucose, but you have to have mitochondria to get energy from fat. Okay, because that is the only place fat metabolism occurs, when you're burning it for energy. So here's what happens. You eat vegetable oils. It wrecks your mitochondria. You decrease your body's ability to burn fat for energy. Now you must eat more carbohydrates for energy. And you have to eat a lot of them, because here's the thing. Glucose, all right, the mitochondria, you can get energy from glucose through the mitochondria as well. As a matter of fact, you get a lot more energy. Like if you ferment glucose and you get 2 molecules, I'm not going to be too technical, but you get molecules, I think it's pyruvate, that ends up going into the mitochondria. And you can also get energy from pyruvate, okay? And not only that, you get a lot more energy. You get about 15 times more energy when the molecules that enter the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, you get like 15 times more energy than you get just from fermenting glucose. Okay. But if you've collapsed your mitochondria, now you can only get, or you're limited to the energy that you can get from fermenting glucose. Okay. So now that means you have to eat a lot more carbohydrates than you would otherwise if you had healthy mitochondria. Okay. So now you're eating all this glucose. What is that doing? That is dumping sugar into your blood. You dump sugar into your blood. Now your body's going to respond by making a crap load of insulin. Mm. And what does insulin do? It directs your body to store energy as fat for two reasons. One reason is that for most of human history, human existence, the purpose of insulin getting sugar, getting energy and storing it as fat was because this gets back to intermittent fasting. For the first 99% of our time on this planet, we were intermittent fasting by default, okay? Because prior to agriculture, no one's that good at hunting and gathering food that you can be eating 3 meals a day with snacks in between. So before agriculture, there was no surplus, okay? So basically, I'm convinced this is the whole reason humans evolved to make insulin. We evolved to make insulin because for most of our time on this planet, food was hard to come by. There would be periods of time where you couldn't eat. So your body would secrete insulin, store some of that energy as fat on your body, and that was what you lived off until you could get that next meal. And that next meal wasn't coming 2 hours later as a snack or 3 hours later at lunch. It might be 3 days later when you finally track down that animal you've been stalking and hunting and you finally got it. That might be when your next meal is, okay? So that was insulin's purpose for most of our time on this planet. But insulin's purpose now is completely different. It obviously isn't storing fat for later use. Now it is storing fat because this is something a lot of people don't realize. Glucose is literally poisonous to your blood vessels. If it's in high concentration, it literally wrecks your blood vessels. That's what diabetes is. Your body doesn't want more than about 1 teaspoon of sugar in all 5 liters of the average blood volume, meaning that if we took out all your blood and we measured how much sugar is in there when it's a healthy amount, it would be 1 teaspoon in over 1 gallon and a quart, okay? 1 teaspoon. Mm. And for most of our time on this planet, certainly before agriculture, you couldn't put more than about 1 teaspoon of sugar into your blood because the foods that could do it didn't exist. If you look at there were no high carb foods prior to agriculture. Okay. If you look at food that grows in the wild, it's all low carb compared to like if you go to the produce section of your supermarket now. Okay. But when we figured out agriculture, we figured out selective breeding and we selectively bred for things that we like. And what we like is stuff to be sweet and we like stuff to be starchy. And what we did was this was the original genetic modification, selective breeding. But we've been doing this for about 10,000 years, but we selected for everything to be high carb. And so now we actually do have foods that can put a lot of sugar into your blood. Prior to agriculture, there was probably only one food that could do it, bees honey, and no one was living off that. Okay. So getting back to what I was saying about how obesity is not mysterious at all. Okay. So you have insulin that you're making more and more of because you have to eat more and more carbs because you can't get energy from fat because your mitochondria collapse. All right. You can't get a lot of energy from glucose because your mitochondria collapse. So you don't get the benefit of those 36 ATP that you get from Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain. All right. So you're limited to how much energy you can get from fermenting glucose in the cytoplasm because you've wrecked your mitochondria, which means you have to eat more and more glucose. You have to eat more and more carbohydrates, which means that now the insulin, if you have a whole bunch of sugar in your blood, now insulin's main function is getting that sugar out of your blood so you don't destroy all your blood vessels. Okay. So for most of our time on this planet, insulin you were making small amounts of insulin to get small amounts of sugar or whatever out of your body and storing it as fat to help you survive until your next meal. But now in the more recent history, insulin's main function is getting the enormous amounts of carbohydrates, sugar, glucose that you're dumping into your blood, getting it out of your blood so you don't wreck your blood vessels. That's what insulin's purpose is now. Okay. So it does that. It gets the sugar out of your blood. thankfully, but because when it stops being able to do that, then we call it diabetes. Okay. But you're making more and more insulin to get more and more the glucose that you're dumping into your blood out of the bloodstream. It's storing it as fat. Okay. Now, what happens next? Well, you have all this body fat, which ideally you would burn for energy, except one, there's no reason to because you're constantly putting carbohydrates into your body. So there's no reason to burn the fat. And two, you don't have the mitochondria to burn the fat. Mitochondria with this vegetable oil.
Great point on the mitochondria in that, when it doesn't make ATP powerhouse of the cell. But here's a little underlying its second feature, its second function. Mitochondria supports your immune system. So when you take vegetable oils and you shut down your mitochondria, you've compromised your immune system. So look at all the people now that are getting sick. How do you feel energy-wise? How do you feel with your immune system? You've got your innate and adaptive immune system functioning in balance and sync. In addition to what you said, I keep hearing whole foods. I keep hearing you say whole foods. And you did a great job with the agriculture because everybody says hunter-gatherer, but no one says how and why. And you just said, of course, hunter-gatherer. It's not so easy to go out and go get a lamb. It's not so easy to go out and get a bison. And not everybody's Castaway and Tom Hanks spearfishing. So that was great. But I got a bunch of questions for you. Let's do some rapid fire. You ready?
Well, actually, let me make one point because just one thing before you do that. Immune system, I would go even further. Every system. Your immune system, your neurological system, your vascular system, every cell in the body requires mitochondria. Every cell requires energy. So you are potentially damaging, and the reason why this is important is because when I make a bold statement like this diet is driving every single one of the diseases of civilization, this is what I'm basing it on. I'm talking about universal things. You need healthy blood vessels. Every part in your body needs healthy blood vessels. If you're wrecking your blood vessels with too much glucose, well, that can affect anywhere and everywhere. If you're destabilizing your cell membranes, that can affect anywhere and everywhere. If you're collapsing your mitochondria, same thing. If you're mutating your DNA. So that's why what I'm saying is everything is affected. Everything. And here's the interesting thing. You pointed out immune system. I mean, pretty much every system of my body got better when I stopped destroying my body with this diet. My immune system included. Okay. But my joints, bad knee arthritis, that's gone. Headaches. I haven't had a headache in 6 years. I mean, everything gets better because I'm talking about fundamental things that are fundamental to the proper biological functioning of humans. Blood vessels, cell membranes, mitochondria, DNA. Everything needs those things. And if you wreck those things, you can damage anywhere and everywhere. So now I'll take the questions.
So essentially, the body's all interconnected, and we know that.
Of course. So but these are just very basic plot things that need to be working well for other things to work well. If your cell membranes are destabilized, things are going to fall apart. If your mitochondria aren't working, you see what I mean? I'm saying that these are just such basic parts of the little foundation of biological functions that if you're wrecking these things, you can have almost anything bad can happen. Okay. And I think the difference in people is some people are more susceptible to get an autoimmune disease, whereas someone else might get heart disease. In my case, I became hypertensive. In my wife's case, she was pre-diabetic, although I wasn't. You see what I mean? But it all comes down to the same thing because when we changed our diet, now she's not diabetic or pre-diabetic. I'm not hypertensive. Basically, it solved all our problems because what we finally come to learn is that this Mediterranean diet was causing all our problems.
You talk about cell membrane and mitochondria before we get to rapid fire. So the mitochondria, not to get too techy, it's got an inner and outer membrane.
Yes.
When those membranes through fusion and fission work efficiently, the mitochondria works efficiently. So it's a dual nasty double whammy vegetable oil on the mitochondria because of the damage to the cell membranes and the mitochondria. But
those both, yes.
So I want to get to this rapid fire.
Okay.
Why the health disinformation? Why are they wrong? Where did they go wrong? Why are they wrong?
Oh, okay. Well, I think a lot of these ideas that we have now originated in a time where our scientific method really wasn't doing too well. I mean, a lot, like, for example, the whole concept that plant foods are better for you, that was a religious idea that had no basis in science. Basically, Wilson, I think her name was, Elizabeth Wilson, a founder of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, decided that you shouldn't eat animals for a number of reasons, but none of them had anything to do with science. Zero to do with science. She thought that eating meat would make men masturbate and make them immoral. I mean, this was the science, okay? John Harvey Kellogg was one of the early Seventh-day Adventists.
That's correct.
Okay. And I think he was clinically insane. I mean, he had all kinds of crazy ideas. He thought you should be pooping at least 4 times a day, every day. He was using enemas. But again, no science, no scientific method, no experimentation, just crazy ideas that popped into people's heads and they just went with it. And the problem is these people were very influential. And they continue to be influential to this day, or at least their intellectual descendants continue to be influential to this day. But the point is that it never started with science. It never started with oh, I think red meat might be good or bad for you. Let's test it and let's see. No, they decided, they had a vision from God telling them that it was doing all these bad things, and they went with that. Okay. So that's one thing. The whole idea that plants are better than animals was a religious idea. And then, of course, at least in our society, it started with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but there are other like older societies that came with, I think Hindu or Buddhism or something. I'm not, don't quote me on that, but there are other traditions, religious traditions that also think plants are just better for you. But the point I'm making is that it had nothing to do with science. Okay. So that's one place we go wrong. Another reason why we go wrong is that, and this is just the cold hard truth. I'm 59 years old, all right? And I am very healthy. I take 0 medications, 0 supplements. There is literally nothing wrong with my body. I haven't taken any kind of medication or supplement in about 6 years. All right. When I was 52, I was overweight, hypertensive. I was on an antihypertensive and I was on a blood thinner. And probably a few more years, I probably would have been on a statin as well. Okay. So when I was 52, I was generating a lot of money for a lot of industries. Okay. I was generating money for the medical industry, because I would have to be seeing doctors and have to be prescribing medicines. I was generating money for the pharmaceutical companies because I'd have to be taking antihypertensive, blood thinners for the rest of my life, and probably statins. And of course, I was generating income for the food industry. I'm going to generate for some food industry because we all have to eat. But because their food makes you unhealthy and makes you sick, and it's also highly addictive, you're going to eat a lot of the food that they make. It's going to make you very sick, which is going to make both the medical industry and the pharmaceutical industry a lot of money. And then, of course, you keep eating that food, and it's just this vicious cycle. But you basically end up being a profit center, okay? Whereas at age 59, I guess you could only say I'm a profit center for the beef industry, but that's about it.
Which we're going to get to.
Yeah.
You're not getting off the hook on that one.
Right. But the point I'm making is that if you're not if every 59-year-old were like me, that's probably trillions of dollars of profit that wouldn't be made. If I was an average 59-year-old, no meds, no supplements, and eating the kind of food I eat. And here's the thing, I probably eat a lot less than most people too. Even though I always eat till I'm full, I'm pretty sure I'm probably spending a lot less on money because I probably don't eat as much, because I don't think it takes as much to get me full as it did when I was eating carb. Well, actually, I know that's the case. I was almost certainly spending more money when my diet was carb based. But anyway, so this is the reason why I think it continues, because too many people profit from the system and the situation the way it is. Okay. And too many people would lose a crap ton of money if there was a paradigm shift and everyone started doing like what people like me are doing. Okay. So I think that's why it perpetuates. So it started out having nothing to do with science. I think we're at a point now where these scientists have to know that the science doesn't support their ideas. I refuse to believe that Harvard School of Public Health doesn't understand that epidemiological data is by far the weakest data. It can't tell you anything about cause effect. You know, they know the saying, association is not causation. And yet all of their recommendations are based on the very weakest data with hazard ratios that aren't even high, hazard ratios that are below 2.0. And they are making recommendations and based on the very weakest of science, right? But so why would they do that? I mean, do they just not understand the things that I just said? Of course they understand it. These are smart people. There can only be one reason why they do it, in my opinion. It's because it is financially advantageous to them to say this, okay? They are funded by pharmaceutical companies. They are funded by food companies, okay? I mean, this is where all the money is coming from. And if the Mercedes in your driveway depends on you saying something, most people will say it, okay? Unfortunately, that's one thing about human nature. So it started out, just not being scientific at all. And then when you actually find out what the science says, all the stuff I've said. I mean, I've said nothing controversial. I mean, it is a fact that humanity goes back at least 2 million years to Homo erectus. It is a fact that we spent 99% of that time without agriculture, which means that we spent 99% of our time of our existence as obligate intermittent fasters on a low carb, zero vegetable oil diet, because literally nothing else was even possible prior to agriculture. And vegetable oils wasn't even possible to consume them until about 200 years ago. So when I say these things, I mean, this is not anything controversial. These are just facts that the diet that they're recommending wasn't even possible for the majority of time on this planet. And it's just a fact that evolution doesn't happen like it does in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where you get a mutation and now you can shoot laser beams out of your eyes. No, evolution is a very slow process. It takes hundreds, thousands of generations for anything significant to happen. Okay, so but yet the vegetable seed oils showed up only 10 generations ago. 10 generations. We're the same. Humans are genetically the same. Actually, we're pretty much the same as we were at the dawn of agriculture. Genetically, there hasn't been any tremendous shift in the last, because agriculture only goes back 12,000 years, which is 600 human generations. That's not a lot. We did most of our evolving in the 100,000 generations that we spent before agriculture. Okay, so all of these things that I'm saying, none of this is controversial. This is just evolutionary biology. Everyone understands this. Everyone understands that it takes a lot of generations for changes to take place. The reason why we can see evolution in real time in organisms like bacteria is because they have a generation time, I think, of 20 minutes. I think it's 20 minutes. But it certainly isn't 20 years. Human generation time is 20 years. So, so while we can see bacteria develop antibiotic resistance in a relatively short period of time, that's because their generation time is 20 minutes, half an hour, or let's say it's even a day. But still, by in a few weeks, they could have gone through tons of generations, whereas a human generation is 20 years. Okay, so if you introduce a radically different food 10 generations ago, 200 years ago, and we are evolved to not handle anything like this food. We've never encountered any food with a 78% PUFA content. It just doesn't exist. We invented it. And then you start telling people to eat this stuff, and then you do more science and find out that, oh, wow, this stuff breaks down into some really nasty poisons that wreck your body in ways we know, but it lowers your cholesterol, so it's all good. So yeah, no, that's not good science.
Now, obviously we know the powers that be have influenced certain things, and it has an influence us towards a more healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
But you did say you would negotiate, which I felt good about, carbs. Now, so if I come to you and I say, look, I want to have some carbs, what are you going to negotiate in? I'm active.
Well, first, the only thing I'm going to say, as long as it's without any vegetable oils. Okay. So that's going to wipe out a lot of your processed foods.
Well, I'm going to ask you, okay, so Now we'll hear the checklist. You say yes or no. Are you good with some berries?
Sure.
Okay, an apple.
I mean, sure. And I'm
Uh,
good with rice as long as you cook it with butter, but not vegetable oils. I'm okay with potatoes if you want, even if you wanted to have French fries. If you fried them in beef tallow, you'll probably be okay. If you fry them in vegetable oils, no, absolutely not.
so you're saying
Okay.
is you can have a little decency, but
I mean, it's just not going to kill you. Now, personally, I think if you want to optimize your health,
ah,
right? If you want to optimize, I mean, like a lot of what I've been doing, and I sent you a link to the post because I wanted to see how healthy can I get. What if, and I just I've done like over the last 6 years, I've done like 9 or 10 different diet trials where I would just eat a certain way and see what happens. See what happens to my body, see what happens to my well-being, my mind, everything. And, and that has led me to some things that I do that I think have optimized my fitness, have made me the healthiest that I can be. And I measure things, I'll measure my weight, my body fat percentage. I will measure how I feel, and my anxiety level, stress, all this stuff. And I just see what works. But you can get plenty healthy eating carbs because at the end of the day, your body does make insulin and your body will clear that blood out of your blood vessels. Okay, it will do that. But if you have vegetable oils poisoning your mitochondria, now you're dependent on eating more carbs, which means now you have to make more and more insulin to handle the more and more carbs you have to eat because you can't burn fat. Okay, so this is why I say vegetable oils are non-negotiable, but carbs are. But if you want to say, okay, I want to get as fit as I possibly can get, at my age, then I would say I think you're going to do best if you don't eat plants and you don't eat carbs. That's been my personal conclusion.
I'm with you. It's interesting. There's a lot of data out there that indicates the carbs that you eat, the good carbs that we just mentioned. And of course, there's fatty fruits, which you mentioned, olives, coconuts, and avocado. If you eat them at the end of a meal, it precipitously decreases your glucose and insulin spike. I think glucose goes down by 73% and insulin goes down by 48%. But I hear what you're saying. It's a
But
real
you know what is even better? Not putting the glucose in there in the first place.
touche, my friend, touche. You've got a great acronym, IRS. Now, people hate when we use that because it means a lot of different things. But the IRS for you is there should be a double I, which I'm going to steal from you. I already told you.
Right.
Watch out for the old school Bronx boy. He's going to swipe from you and make it different. So it's inflammation, insulin,
Restriction strategies, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so here's what it started because when I started this and I told you how I relearned about, what insulin does and then started to see its central role in metabolic fitness. And so when I started off, I just had the first I. I just had insulin restriction strategies. And my rationale was that okay, insulin is the hormone that makes you store body. And so if you want to not store so much body fat, probably the best target would be to not make so much insulin. And we know what makes you make the most insulin, which is carbohydrates. So if you eat less carbohydrates, you make less insulin, you store less body fat. And so that's how it started, okay? But then the reason I maybe like a year or two later, I put in the second I, insulin inflammation restriction strategies, is because then I started understanding that there are things that damage your body. And here's the thing I want everyone to keep in mind. Inflammation is the body's response to damage. Okay. That is why your body it doesn't just cause inflammation for no reason. It causes your body, inflammation, it'll produce inflammation as a response to damage. And the inflammatory response is to repair damage. So if something is damaging you, your body will generally have an inflammatory response. Now, yes, there's autoimmune diseases and stuff where we can't figure out, well, what is the thing that's damaging? Why is the body just attacking itself? And I'll get into that because I still think that is related to diet. But the bottom line is that your immune system, your inflammatory system, it's a response to damage. And then I started to learn about, that a lot of foods have things in it that will cause inflammation, gluten, lectins, casein protein. Okay, these are things that may cause damage and may inhibit it and may elicit an inflammatory response. And so I then later said, okay, well, you want to not only just try and restrict your insulins, you also want to restrict your inflammatory reaction. And so maybe there's some foods that it's better to not have a lot of. Oxalates or an excellent example. Sally Norton has done some great work on oxalates, and for some people that stuff is highly inflammatory, and some people tolerate it better than others. So that's when I said, okay, so you want to try and limit your carbs, but you also want to try to eat less of the foods that will cause an inflammatory reaction. Okay, but but I didn't feel like putting another eye in there, so I just said, okay, well that first eye will count for both of them. Okay,
you opened up my opportunity.
That's fine. That's fine. But
I hear the people in the backdrop, the imaginary people back here. You know what they say? Rob, you've got to ask him. He wants me to eat all this fat and no carbohydrates. I went to my primary care physician. I went to my cardiologist. They're smart like this guy. Yes. And you know what they said? Fat raises my cholesterol.
Right. Okay.
You're going to give me.
So here's the thing, and this to me is probably the biggest the biggest misconception in medicine right now. Okay, well, first of all, and they had to back off on that claim, by the way. I mean, if you go to like the American Cardiology website, they've removed that claim that saturated fat raises your cholesterol. All right, or at least the more updated ones, because that is absolutely false. Here's what's happening: saturated fat doesn't raise your cholesterol. However, phytosterols lower your cholesterol. And phytosterols are basically they're like cholesterol-like molecules that are found in plants. Phyto is usually a term that denotes plants. So these are plant sterols, okay? And we know that these will lower your cholesterol. Matter of fact, this is one of the selling points of a plant-based diet. They want you to eat a plant-based diet because it will lower your cholesterol. And what is in your diet that lowers your cholesterol? These phytosterols, okay? Now, then they go from that to lowering your cholesterol and saying it's a good thing because then they make another claim that cholesterol plays some kind of causative role in cardiovascular disease, in heart attack and stroke, okay? Okay, so they say you want to lower your cholesterol because cholesterol is causing heart disease, except it's not. It's clearly not, okay? It is not causing, as a matter of fact, I challenge anybody who believes this to show any mechanism by which cholesterol or saturated fat actually causes harm to any living human cell, tissue, or organ. And I guarantee you they cannot do it. I can show you glucose, I can show you strong data showing that glucose wrecks blood vessels. I can show you strong data that shows that these metabolites of vegetable oils wreck mitochondria. I mean, this is easy. We know the mechanisms, okay? But ask someone to show a plausible mechanism or animal model, and I mean an animal model that is analogous to humans, because the models that they did with rabbits, you feed herbivorous animals, saturated fat, that doesn't tell you anything about what happens when you feed animals that are supposed to eat meat, okay? Completely different thing. Okay, so, but here's what they base it on. If they have found cholesterol inside of the plaques, the plaques that are inside of coronary arteries when they close off, they find it in these things. So they find cholesterol. So they make the leap so cholesterol in your serum, if it's high, then that means that'll be more cholesterol in these plaques, and these plaques will get bigger and bigger. And then when they close off, you have a heart attack. So therefore, your serum cholesterol is somehow causing heart disease. Now, let me tell you how ridiculous that hypothesis is, okay? First of all, you know where else you can find cholesterol? Every single cell and tissue in your body, okay? It is in your cell membrane. So the fact that you find cholesterol in plaques tells you nothing about how it got there, right? Okay, except we know how it got there. It got there because it is part of the inflammatory response. And what causes an inflammatory response? Damage. Okay. Damage. And what damages blood vessels? We've already said glucose does, okay? Vegetable oils do. Okay. So we know the things cigarette smoking does. We know the things that damage your blood vessels. Okay. So, so you have something that's damaging your blood vessel. Your body responds with an inflammatory response, of which, probably the first stage is to make a clot, and then the clot will harden, and then hopefully you'll get remodeling of this clot. Like if you cut your finger, you'll get a blood clot, and then that clot will become a scab, and then eventually the body cells come in and remodel, and then eventually your finger will look like it did before. But if you just kept cutting your finger over and over, cut it and then it starts to heal a little bit, and then you cut it again the next day, and then you cut it again the next day. All right. What would happen then? You would probably get a hypertrophic scar. Okay. You would probably get a scar or what's called a keloid of some kind because you're never really allowing it to fully heal. Well, this is what's happening inside your blood vessels. If you're chronically hyperglycemic, you are chronically damaging your blood vessels. If your blood pressure is high, you are chronically damaging your blood vessels. Okay? If you're dumping vegetable oils into your body, you're chronically destabilizing your cell membranes, wrecking your mitochondria. You're causing damage. You are damaging things. If you smoke cigarettes, you are damaging blood vessels. Okay? So now the body responds by trying to heal this. But if you're chronically damaging, you're going to be chronically trying to heal it. And what's going to happen is that plaque that's inside your vessel, it's just going to get bigger and bigger. And when it gets big enough to close off the vessel, then we call it a heart attack. And then you look inside the clot and you find cholesterol and say, oh, that must have been what did it. This is how stupid that is, in my opinion. This would be like saying that you're in your city, you have an arson problem. And so you go to a burning building and you find firemen there. Okay. And then you come up with the brilliant idea, wow, there are firemen inside that fire burning building. They must have been who had set the fire. So let's solve our arson problem by getting rid of our fire department. That is how stupid it is to attack cholesterol to treat cardiovascular disease. No, you don't want to eliminate the thing that's there trying to fix things. You want to eliminate the things that cause the damage, the thing that set the fire. And cholesterol is not what set the fire. We know what sets the fire. High blood sugar, high blood pressure, smoking. Okay, these set the fires. Now, here's the thing. And the thing is, we have evidence that what I'm saying is exactly correct. Because David Diamond went and actually looked at the cholesterol data, that we were all taught, that linked heart disease to cholesterol. And he actually looked at the data and did sub-analysis of it and actually looked at, do people with the highest cholesterol actually get more heart attack? And what he found was that there is a subset of people with very high cholesterol, familial hypercholesterolemia. There is a subset who will, they might get a heart attack in their 30s or something, okay? This subset were people who smoked, people who are metabolically unwell, hypertensive, diabetic, had something else wrong with them, or they had some kind of clotting disorder. But if they were metabolically fit, they didn't smoke, and they were metabolically fit, did not smoke, didn't have some funny clotting disorder, the people with the highest cholesterol on the planet live longer. They have lower rates of heart disease. They get cancer at lower rates. They are healthier people. Okay. Now, yeah, if they smoke, they might get the heart attack. So here's the thing. These are people who are walking around with serum cholesterol 500, 600, total cholesterol 800, their whole lives. How are they living longer than other people?
Lack of information.
Because they're not damaging their blood vessels. They're not smoking the cigarettes that would damage their blood vessels. They're not diabetic with the hyperglycemia that would damage their blood vessels. They're not hypertensive to damage their blood vessels. They don't have some wacky clotting disorder, because normally cells turn over and you have every cell is like regenerating and stuff. But if you have some clotting disorder that interferes with the normal cellular turnover and the glycophage, all that stuff, yeah, you might get a clot, some kind of funky clot from that, and your cholesterol being high might make that worse. But again, basically what he showed was that if you didn't have something else that we know is playing a causative role or actually causing damage, and you can have these super high cholesterols, you are actually healthier. You live longer. Okay? So to me, the fact that the cholesterol hypothesis is still even a thing, to me, it's a travesty. It's a travesty. It's a complete fraud. Because whenever I present this data to cardiologists, first of all, they don't even know this stuff. And to be fair to them, I didn't know this stuff. I didn't know this stuff until YouTube, and I've come across David Diamond, and I see what the actual numbers show. So they're ignorant, but they're ignorant because they're not being taught this. Because they're not being taught this because they make a lot less money. They do a lot less angioplasties. They prescribe a lot less statins. If this fact got out, if the fact got out that, oh no, your goal should be metabolic fitness. Your goal should be not smoking. Your goal should be, well, all right, if you have a clotting disorder, that might be the one instance where maybe statin is justified, maybe, okay? But those are rare things. Most people don't have clotting disorders, okay? So these should be your goals, not lowering your cholesterol. And here's the kicker. So many people, myself included, when we got super healthy, when we changed our diet and we got super healthy, our cholesterol numbers all went way up, okay? My cholesterol numbers doubled. When I was fat and sick and hypertensive, pulmonary embolus, my LDL was running half of what it runs now, okay? But you know what else was running half of what it runs now back then? My testosterone was running half. So was my vitamin D, okay? Now, why do I mention those two things? Because those are just two of the very important chemicals in your body, compounds in your body that you need cholesterol to make. You know, you need cholesterol to make testosterone. You need cholesterol to make vitamin D. You need it to make all the sex hormones. You need it to make the bile acids, which help you metabolize fat, right? They help break down the fat and help you digest it. So you need cholesterol to do that. You need cholesterol to stabilize your cell membranes. You need cholesterol. So I don't think it was a coincidence that I got super healthy and my testosterone level doubled and my vitamin D level doubled without supplements or not taking any TRT or anything like that, that they doubled in tandem with my cholesterol doubling. Because here's the kicker, is that I think the real disease isn't hypercholesterolemia. I think the disease is hypocholesterolemia. And I'll explain why. Okay. We first gained the ability to measure serum cholesterol in 1955. Okay. But by 1955, we were already on a plant-based diet that was radically different from any diet that was possible for our first 2 million years on this planet. Because remember, we spent our first 2 million years on this planet prior to agriculture. And prior to agriculture, there is no way humans were on a plant-dominant, carbohydrate-dominant diet. Because if you look at what plants and plant food was like before agriculture, there is no way we could get enough calories from that. We couldn't get enough nutrients. Like if you look, just Google wild corn. It literally looks like bumpy grass. That's what it looks like, okay? And this could not be the dominant part of your diet when this is what your plants were like. So, okay, so we spent most of our time evolving clearly on an animal-based diet, okay? We were hunting and gathering, but we were getting most of our calories, most of our subsistence from what we could hunt, or we were also probably eating carrion, you know, like whatever, like if we, you know, some other animal killed something and we got their scraps, or we would break the bone marrow and eat that. You know, we were probably surviving off a lot of carrion before we developed, you know, good hunting skills and all. And one thing that supports that is how acidic the human stomach is. It is like among the most acidic in the animal kingdom. It's like at the level of animals that we know survive on carrion, like vultures, buzzards, those kind of animals. Most other animals, you know, like other non-human primates, their stomach is much less acidic than ours. Chimps, gorillas, you know, much less acidic than ours. Okay, so we probably got most of our nutrients from what we could hunt or what we could, you know, steal from, you know, gather the carrion from what other animals hunted. And we were living off that. And then, you know, yeah, if we could get some berries and some stuff, we would eat that. But we were getting most of our calories from the animals. Okay. All right. So here's the thing. We basically were eating very few plants, getting very few calories from our plants, which means we were not getting phytosterols in our diet. Okay. And what did I tell you lowers your cholesterol? Phytosteroids. Basically, plant foods lower your cholesterol. So for most of the time on we were on an animal-dominant diet, very little plant foods, which means no phytosterols to lower our cholesterol. But when we first figured out how to measure cholesterol in 1955, by that time, every place we were measuring was on plant-dominant diets. most of the people's food calories were coming from plants, which means you were getting a constant dose of phytosterols, which means you were already lowering your cholesterol. Now, interesting thing, I saw something where, but actually the average cholesterol back in the 50s and 60s was much higher than it is now. Okay. But I would argue that if there was a fossil record of serum cholesterol, if we had some way of seeing, oh, what this person's serum cholesterol was from bones or something, I would wager that those levels were probably way higher still. And so what I am saying is I think it is the natural human state to have very high cholesterols, not low cholesterols, because I think it is the natural human state to be surviving on an animal dominant diet, not a plant dominant diet. I propose that for most of our time on this planet, we were on an animal food dominant diet, which means we were getting very low light phytosteroids, which means there was nothing to lower our cholesterol. So the point I'm making is that by the time we first start establishing guidelines and norms for what cholesterol is, we were already on a diet that was radically different from the one that we evolved on. Okay. And so what I am saying is that, my cholesterol, my LDL is often over 300. And what I am saying is that
You said your LDL,
Yeah. And my total might be in the 400s. Yeah. Like I think the last time I measured it, my LDL was 284 or something, but it's not uncommon.
I think you need to share with everybody what you eat in your what. Now, by the way, and we had this conversation. You were very kind. You said, bring it on, Rob. It's not a problem. I'm not a big proponent of eating one meal a day.
Yeah.
That's fine. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just not my thing.
Right.
But I think you should really tell everybody what constitutes your meal virtually every day.
Okay. Well, first, let me give some background, okay? Because I didn't wake up one day and just start doing what I'm doing now. And this is why, and I do want you to link this put this in the links where I go through, where I basically told how I got to where I am now. Okay. Because I started just with intermittent fasting and some other things. But at this point, I pretty much just eat red meat, salt, and water. That's pretty much all I eat. And I only eat once a day. Okay. I usually eat around anywhere from 2 to 5. And then there's another thing I do, which is kind of unusual. I never drink anything while I'm eating. Okay. I eat and then I wait at least an hour before I drink anything. And the only thing I drink is water. Well, sparkling water. I got to have some fun, but sparkling water. But I don't drink juice. I don't drink alcohol, coffee, none of that stuff. Okay. But I didn't start out this way. This is just in a long series of elimination diet trials that I've done over the last 6 years. I just came to this because I find I am at my peak fitness, my peak health, my athleticism, my recovery, my mental focus. Everything is peak doing this particular pattern. And the interesting thing is when you show that link, I show the things that change with each one of these things. When I eliminated fruit, 35 pounds just from that. When I eliminated lemon and lime juice, I got even more lean. Okay. When I started drinking only an hour, waiting at least an hour after drinking to eat, that's when I got to my lowest body fat percentage of my entire life. I wasn't at this level of body fat percentage even in my teens. Okay. And I'm at this now at 59. And that was just from doing everything the same, except I don't drink while I'm eating. I eat until I'm full. An hour later, I have my sparkling water and I just drink as much as I want. And then I don't eat until the next day. Okay.
Aren't you a steak guy? I mean, I want you to lay it out because I want this.
I'm pretty much beef and lamb. Beef and lamb is what I eat.
How much?
Until I'm full. Until I'm full. It turns out being, and when I say, and I'm not talking pre-cooked weight. I'm telling you the actual amount of food that I'm eating every day. Because what I would do is I would weigh myself right before I eat, and then weigh myself right afterwards. Okay, so I would do that to, because if you have a 40-ounce steak, but then you cook it and then you take out the bone, which you're not eating, so that doesn't really tell you how much you ate. The best way is right before I eat and then right after I eat. So I'm typically consuming between 1.2 and 1.6 pounds of beef and lamb every day. And again, because I'm not drinking while I'm eating, this is just food that I'm eating.
Well, you're not drinking because you're trying not to dilute your HCl. You want all the digestive enzymes, which is
that was what I was testing. I heard someone talk about it, say, that maybe that, that there might be some benefit to doing that. And then I thought about it. I was like, that'd be an interesting thing to try. And then I thought about, look in the wild. I mean, the animal, when the lion, was eating that, gazelle or whatever, he's not washing it down with a Chianti. He's not drinking a beer at the same time. He's eating the crap out of that antelope or whatever. And then he probably sleeps for like 24 hours. And then he goes to the river to get to drink. Okay. And tries to avoid the hippos and the alligators. So,
I got to jump on you.
yeah.
Are you tired during? So I assume you're eating late at night.
No, not late. Not late. No.
Okay, so you're eating dinner?
Between 2 and I'm usually done eating by 5 p.m. So typically
Okay.
I eat around 2 p.m. But like late would be 5. If I go out to dinner, yeah, then I might eat at 6 or 7, but that'll be my only meal. Yeah.
No veggies for you right now.
Oh, no veggies,
No broccoli, no Brussels sprouts, no kale. Okay. No no avocado or no guacamole. Solamente red meat, right? Carne.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. When I go out to dinner, I might have because I also don't eat poultry, fish, seafood. I don't eat any of that stuff either. Except like if special occasions. Like I might have something like that, like if we go out to dinner, I might have a lobster tail. I might have, but as far as the other stuff, plant stuff,
fish.
There's nothing wrong with fish.
Okay.
And so again, when I don't want anyone to think that just because I don't eat it, that I think there's something wrong with it.
Yeah,
I don't think there's anything wrong with fish. I don't think there's anything wrong with seafood. I just found, again, the way I got to this point is how fit am I when I'm doing this? How fit am I when I'm doing that? And for me, it is clear. I am absolutely at my fittest. I recover the best. I'm fast. I'm the fastest moving around the court. I have the least amount of aches and pains. I mean, all this stuff. I am at my peak when it's red meat, salt, and water.
That works for you. So you've tapped into maybe your
So that's why I do it. That's why I do it.
You're doing a carnivore diet, right?
Yeah, but a very strict one, I guess. Because I don't
Right.
Because you could eat poultry on a carnivore diet, but I don't. I mean, I will, but just not regularly. Not regularly.
Right. No worries. So if I were to ask you to close, this has been great. And by the way, I'm only asking you the questions because everybody's going to ask. I don't disagree with you. I'm a big believer in finding out, N of 1, what individually works for you. And you've done that and you've tested it. And the courage that you've exuded imbues me with enthusiasm to continue, because you're saying the model that they gave us is wrong, and it's wrong for a lot of reasons, but the science isn't there as a man, as a medical doctor of science. Right. So let's recap the 3 things that everybody should not do. Limit your glucose, no vegetable oils. Let's keep your insulin resistance down.
I tell people that if they could spend a day inside my body the way it was 6 years ago and then the way it is now, they'd realize why I am so hyped about this stuff. Okay, the difference between what I was then and now, it's night and day. And what I want is to put this information out there for people who might be where I was 6 years ago, not feeling particularly happy about living on this earth because of how crappy everything is and how bad you feel, to going from that to where I just can't wait to get out of bed in the morning and I'm gonna go do this and that and I feel amazing and my stay fit and I'm not hungry, I'm not suffering, I'm not doing all this stuff. And I'm telling people it's possible. This is how I did it. You don't have to do exactly what I do to do it. Okay, fine. But it is achievable. It is doable. But you have to understand that it's not so much what I'm doing, it's what I'm not doing. And what I'm not doing is that diet that caused all my problems. Okay?
Dr. Leon, Dr. Rob Silverman, Proven Health Alternatives, always yours in health.